Alongside the personal grief that all my family are feeling, we also share with so many of you in the United Kingdom, in all the countries where the Queen was head of state, in the Commonwealth, and across the world.
His family changed their name during World War I to conceal their heritage. His great-great-grandfather couldn't even speak English. If you trace King Charles III's bloodline back just a few generations, you'll discover that he is more German than British. The DNA doesn't lie, and what it reveals about the monarchy's carefully hidden ancestry may surprise you. This is the hidden German heritage of King Charles III, the name they desperately wanted you to forget. Windsor. It sounds quintessentially British, doesn't it? Regal, historic, and undeniably English. However, it's actually a name that was created relatively recently. At a meeting of the Privy Council on July 17, 1917, King George V declared that all male line descendants of Queen Victoria would bear the name Windsor. This wasn't a restoration of an ancient family name, it was essentially a rebranding, a public relations move during wartime. The real family name? Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Let that sink in for a moment. The British royal family, the institution that represents Britain itself, was known by a German name until 1917. King Edward VII, the eldest son of Queen Victoria, and Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha founded the British line. His successor, King George V, changed the family name to Windsor in 1917. Why the change? The strong anti-German sentiment among the public during World War I prompted King George V to alter the family's name when Great Britain's most formidable enemy was Germany. The name Windsor was adopted after Windsor Castle, and some suggest that the March 1917 bombing of London by the Gotha G4, a heavy German aircraft, also influenced his decision. Consider the irony. German bombers bearing the family's actual name were dropping explosives on London, creating problematic optics. When Kaiser Wilhelm II heard about the name change, he reportedly joked that he looked forward to seeing a performance of The Merry Wives of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, poking fun at his cousin's hasty rebranding. For King Charles III, this means that his family name, if not for that 1917 decree, would still be Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. Windsor is effectively a stage name, a corporate rebranding for the monarchy. And here's the kicker. Charles has never denied his German ancestry, which is not very popular among many English people, according to his distant cousin, Prince Eduard von Anhalt, the German prince who couldn't speak English. The German influence on the British throne did not begin with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. It stretches back much further. The House of Hanover ruled Britain from 1714 to 1901 and was entirely German. The British royal family has German roots dating back to 1714 when George I of Hanover became king. George I could barely speak English, as much of his reign was spent fighting wars in his native Germany. Imagine this. The King of England, George I, arrives in London in 1714 at the age of 54. He is German and speaks virtually no English. His court communicates in German or French, and his advisors and mistresses are also German. For all practical purposes, Britain had imported a king who viewed England as a somewhat inconvenient addition to his Hanoverian territories. This was not merely a brief connection with German royalty. The Hanoverian dynasty lasted almost 2 centuries. 6 British monarchs came from this German house: George I, George II, George III, George IV, William IV, and Victoria. By the time Victoria ascended the throne in 1837, the German connection had become so normalized that it raised no eyebrows when she married her German first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, in 1840. Queen Victoria married Albert, who was from a modest royal dynasty in northeastern Bavaria. Nearly 8 decades later, their grandson, George V, disowned the cumbersome patronymic while his country was fighting Germany in World War I. For King Charles III, this means that every single one of his ancestors who sat on the British throne from 1714 to 1917, over 200 years, was of German ancestry. German blood, German traditions, and German family connections have shaped the British monarchy. It has been German for longer than the United States has existed. Prince Philip, the Greek who was actually German. If the Windsor family has German heritage, Prince Philip, the father of Charles, brought an entire European mix with Germany prominently featured. Philip was born in Greece into families of Greek and Danish royal descent, but his family was exiled from Greece when he was just 18 months old. However, here's the twist. Philip was not ethnically Greek at all. His ancestry is primarily German, Danish, and Russian, and his lineage can be traced back to the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glucksburg. This Danish royal house was placed on the Greek throne by European powers at the end of the 19th century. Interestingly, Philip never learned to speak Greek. So, what was Philip's true heritage? He descended in the male line from the Danish royal family, and the House of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glucksburg is a mix of both German and Danish ancestry. This house represents Philip's real family name before he anglicized it to Mountbatten upon becoming a British citizen. The surname Mountbatten comes from his mother's family name. While his mother's family was originally the Battenberg family, which was itself German, his father's family name was Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg. In 1917, due to anti-German sentiments during World War I, King George V decreed that all his relatives with Germanic names and titles who were British subjects had to adopt new English-sounding names. Consequently, the Battenberg surname was anglicized to Mountbatten. Regarding Philip's family, both sides had German connections. His mother's family was German, and his father's family was a German-Danish mix that had ruled in Greece. When Philip married Elizabeth in 1947, their engagement drew some controversy for several reasons. He had no financial standing, was foreign-born, and had sisters who had married German noblemen with ties to the Nazi regime. To mitigate negative publicity in Britain, Philip's German relatives, including 3 of his surviving sisters, were not invited to the wedding, although his mother did attend. 3 of Philip's 4 sisters married German princes. One sister, Cecilia, and her husband Georg Donatus were members of the Nazi Party before dying in a plane crash in 1937. These German connections were not merely historical curiosities. They were recent, controversial, and carefully managed by the palace. Queen Victoria, the grandmother of European German royalty. To understand the extent of the German heritage within the British royal family, one must look back at Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria was half German, as her mother was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. She further cemented this connection by marrying her German first cousin, Albert. However, Victoria's most significant contribution to this German influence came through her children. Victoria and Albert had 9 children who married into nearly every royal house in Europe. This widespread intermarriage earned Victoria the title, the Grandmother of Europe. King Charles III is the first British monarch directly descended from 2 of Queen Victoria's children. On his father's side, he descends from Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, who was Victoria's 2nd daughter and 3rd child. This means Charles shares Victoria's lineage in multiple ways, granting him a double Victoria connection and reinforcing his German roots. Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Charles's parents, were also distant cousins, largely due to their shared ancestry with Queen Victoria. The British royal family not only had German ties, they were at the heart of an extensive network of German royalty that spanned the continent. Sociologist Michael Hartman noted that while there was a king in countries such as Britain, Spain, or France, Germany had at least 30 regional rulers who could only marry among themselves. This often led to unions with German nobles, resulting in most European royal dynasties being interconnected with German lineage. Germany historically had more royal houses than any other nation, meaning that if you were a member of royalty looking to marry another royal, the likelihood was high that you would be marrying someone of German descent. This dynamic created a genetic bottleneck over the centuries, as the same families married each other generation after generation. King Charles III is a descendant of numerous European royal houses, including those of England, Scotland, Denmark, Germany, and Greece, each with its own history of intermarriage. The carefully curated public image. The British monarchy has spent over a century managing perceptions of its German heritage. After 1917, the changes extended beyond just the name. The entire public presentation transformed. German relatives were quietly removed from guest lists, German titles were renounced, and any German connections were minimized in official biographies. King George V restricted the use of British princely titles to his closest relatives and, in 1919, stripped 3 of his German relations of their British titles under the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. The message was clear: We are British now, forget the German connections. However, it is impossible to erase one's DNA or change centuries of genealogy retroactively. In 2015, a rare photograph shocked the British public, revealing a young Elizabeth, around 6 or 7 years old, practicing a straight-armed Hitler salute alongside her mother and sister, seemingly encouraged by her uncle Edward VIII. While this did not convey Nazi sympathy, since it occurred in 1933 before the full horror of the regime was known, it highlighted a complex and uncomfortable reality. The royals had close German family ties, some of which would end up on the wrong side of history. Today, King Charles speaks German fluently and has frequently visited Germany, both on official and private trips. Unlike his predecessors, who attempted to downplay their German connections, Charles seems more comfortable acknowledging this heritage, albeit within limits. He may not emphasize it or make it a focal point of the palace, but when prompted, he acknowledges that German heritage is indeed part of the royal story. It has to be, because genetically, historically, and undeniably, it is the truth. The DNA reality, what the numbers actually show. If King Charles III took a DNA test, what would it reveal about his ancestry? Charles's heritage is a blend of several ethnic backgrounds, including German, Greek, French, Dutch, Scottish, Welsh, English, and Irish, with a significant emphasis on German ancestry. His mother, Elizabeth II, belonged to the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which later became the House of Windsor. Her lineage is predominantly German, tracing back to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. On his father's side, Prince Philip came from a combination of German, Danish, and Russian royal lineages, all of which also have considerable German roots. Charles's maternal grandmother, Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, was the daughter of Claude Bowes-Lyon, the 14th Earl of Strathmore, and Kinghorn in the Peerage of Scotland. This connection adds a significant portion of Scottish and English ancestry to Charles's genetic background. The Queen Mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, represents Charles's most substantial British genetic contribution, linking him to Scottish and English aristocracy that did not frequently intermarry with German royalty. Although Diana Spencer, the mother of William and Harry, comes from a distinctly British aristocratic lineage, the German ancestry of the British royal family will continue to become less prominent over time. While it is indeed becoming diluted, it remains present. DNA does not acknowledge public relations campaigns. It is unaffected by name changes or public sentiment. The genetic legacy of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, Battenberg, and Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg, Glucksburg, it's all encoded in Charles's chromosomes. Why this matters and why they tried to hide it. Some may ask, why does it matter that the British royal family is genetically German? Isn't this just a piece of historical trivia? This issue is significant because it highlights aspects of identity, nationalism, and the narratives we create about power. The British monarchy is meant to symbolize Britain. It is referred to as the British royal family and presides over British traditions, ceremonies, and national identity. However, for over 300 years, those wearing the crown have predominantly had German ancestry. This creates a cognitive dissonance. How can the ultimate symbol of Britishness not be particularly British? The answer lies in a carefully controlled narrative. The name change in 1917 was not about rejecting German heritage. It was about managing British public opinion during a war against Germany. It was a matter of survival. The British royal family's decision to renounce their German names during World War I marked a pivotal moment in their history and demonstrated their dedication to the nation they served. However, it was also fundamentally dishonest. Changing one's name does not alter one's ancestry. Calling themselves Windsor does not erase their Saxe-Coburg-Gotha roots. In today's era of DNA testing and genealogical transparency, these historical misrepresentations are becoming increasingly difficult to uphold. We can trace bloodlines, calculate percentages, and clearly see that the British monarchy is one of the most successful examples of rebranding in history. They transformed a German royal family, gave it an English name, wrapped it in British pageantry, and presented it to the world as the embodiment of Britain. And it was effective. For over a century, most people overlooked these origins. The Germanic lineage faded from public consciousness, and Windsor became the name most closely associated with the monarchy. But DNA remembers, genealogy records remember, History remembers. King Charles III sits on the British throne as the latest in a long line of monarchs with predominantly German ancestry. From George I, who could barely speak English, to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's German dynasty, to Prince Philip's carefully anglicized German surname, the pattern is unmistakable. The blood flowing through Charles's veins is more German than English. His genetic heritage connects him more closely to the royal houses of Germany, Denmark, and Russia than to the common people of Britain he symbolically represents. This isn't a scandal, it's history. Royal families across Europe intermarried for centuries, creating an interconnected web in which German nobility appeared in virtually every bloodline. Britain's royals were not unique in this. They were participants in a continental system. What makes Britain unique is how successfully they've obscured this reality. The name Windsor, British iconography, careful public relations, and strategic silence about German connections all contribute to this narrative. It's quite remarkable. Take a German dynasty, rebrand it during a war, maintain the fiction for a century, and watch as people forget the truth. However, in the age of genetic testing and genealogical research, the truth becomes harder to hide. King Charles III is British by citizenship, by culture, and by choice. But by DNA, he is remarkably, undeniably, predominantly German. And that's the truth they've spent a century trying to make you forget.